Welcome to Cornell University's New York State Integrated Pest Management online courses. Today we'll learn about Integrated Pest Management, that's IPM for short, for Asian soybean aphid. Please complete the pretest before you begin. Today, let's discuss how soybean acreage and value have gone up. The Asian soybean aphid's complicated life cycle. How to scout for soybean aphids and when to use an economic threshold. Management strategies. Implementing those management strategies. And last, evaluating your management practices. What sorts of strategies are we talking about? They include planting soybean cultivars with resistance to soybean aphids, using insecticide pre-treated seeds, choosing strategies that limit insecticide resistance, the importance of natural enemies, and using pesticides as a last resort. Farms dot the northeast landscape around every turn and bend in the road. Corn, apples, grapes, alfalfa, forages, wheat, oats, rye, barley, vegetables, berries, and soybeans. All are grown here. One crop that's increased dramatically during the past 25 years is soybeans. New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware planted 1,360,000 acres of soybeans in 2013. In fact, these 6 states harvested 73,570,000 bushels in 2013. The Northeast's 2013 harvest could fill 163 miles of train grain cars, and soybean acreage is expected to expand even more. Why? Attractive commodity prices, new varieties with favorable yield potentials, local commercial roasters and oil processing plants, and access to local and world markets. As acreage and value of soybeans increase, many growers have questions about crop protection. In 2013, the value of the crop to the Northeast exceeded $952 million at the price of $12.94 per bushel. Farmers are more concerned with soybean pests since soybeans have become a high-value crop. They want to make sure they protect yields and value by avoiding serious pest-related issues. Many pests can attack soybeans. We have seed corn maggot, Japanese beetle, 2-spotted spider mites, soybean thrips, and in some areas in western New York, bean leaf beetles. Some diseases also plague soybeans, such as the Phomopsis complex of pod and stem blights, brown spot, downy mildew, sclerotinia stem rot, Phytophthora root and stem rot, white mold, soybean vein necrosis virus, sudden death syndrome, and more. And then there's the Asian soybean aphid. Its official name is Aphis glycines, a fairly new pest in New York. We call it SBA for short. This aphid, native to East Asia, probably came into North America via Chicago in the mid-90s. In 2000, it was found in Wisconsin, and by the end of the growing season had spread to Iowa, Michigan, Illinois, Kentucky, Indiana, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, and West Virginia. Just a year later, SBA had landed in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and 26 counties in New York. Now soybean aphids are everywhere in the U.S. Everywhere, that is, that soybeans are grown. SBAs are tiny, less than a 16th inch, and soft-bodied. Their color is pale yellow-green, and they have a pair of black cornicles on their hind end. Call those cornicles tailpipes, and you won't forget them. Most generations of SBA don't have wings, except for early field invaders and a population readying for migration or dispersal. Soybean aphids are the only aphid you'll find on soybeans, but you could confuse them with potato leafhopper adults and nymphs. Potato leafhopper adults are lime green and 1/8 inch long. Their nymphs are smaller, bright yellow-green, and have no wings. Potato leafhoppers also move more quickly than aphids and can walk sideways. SBA has a complicated biology. Let's start with egg laying each fall. The buckthorn plant is the winter host for soybean aphids, which lay their eggs at the base of next year's leaf buds. These eggs are green to black, depending on how far along their development is, and they're less than 1/16 inch long. Buckthorn is a listed invasive brought from Europe as an ornamental in the mid-1800s. It grows abundantly all over New York in hedgerows and along forest edges. As an understory shrub or tree, buckthorn is often multi-trunked and can reach 25 feet. Its branches or twigs are tipped with short thorns, and its egg-shaped leaves are dark green, smooth, and glossy. Note their curved veins, pointed tips, and finely toothed margins. Leaves cling to trees through late fall without changing color. Buckthorn fruits are round, black, poisonous berries about 1/4 inch across and borne in clusters at branch tips. They resemble wild black cherries. Trees produce either male or female flowers, so trees with berries are always females. Most fruits fall directly beneath the shrubs, creating a dense understory. But birds and mice eat the plentiful fruit, and its strong laxative effect also helps distribute seeds, often far from the parent. After wintering on buckthorn as eggs, female SBAs and females alone hatch in spring when temperatures reach about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. They remain on buckthorn for up to 4 generations, giving live birth to female nymphs. SBA nymphs molt about 4 times on their way to adulthood. This asexual parthenogenic reproduction is a lot like cloning. Next, these females start producing winged female aphids, aphids which leave the buckthorn in search of soybean fields. These winged forms look a little different. They have black heads and thoraxes, the thorax being the part right behind the head. Their abdomens are dark green, but they've still got those black cornicles, those tailpipes near their rear end. Once on soybeans, SBA females revert to giving live birth to wingless aphids again and again. All these wingless aphids are females. Each one can give birth to 3 to 8 aphids each day for up to a month. Young aphids mature in 3 to 7 days, ready to produce more offspring. When conditions are ideal, they can double their populations every 9 to 13 days, tearing through as many as 15 generations all told. Ideal daily temperatures are 72 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit and below 78% relative humidity. When temperatures reach 81 degrees Fahrenheit, their life cycle slows. Those ideal conditions are common in New York between July and August. If populations explode, females give birth to winged females, especially if they've so heavily colonized your field that they've run out of nourishment. These winged aphids then fly off in search of other soybean fields to colonize. Soybean aphids have a piercing, sucking mouth, sort of like a sharp, hollow straw. They poke it into the phloem and suck out sugar-filled sap, replacing it with their saliva. And that saliva is toxic to soybeans. All the while, they keep pushing out wingless babies. As days grow shorter and soybeans start to dry down, females once more give birth to winged females, and males too this time. The males and females fly off in search of buckthorn plants. Once there, they mate, and females lay eggs near the base of a buckthorn bud. The eggs overwinter on the plant, making SBA's 1-year life cycle complete. But actually, there's a second way soybean aphids can infest soybeans. That's when hordes of SBA ride storm fronts from the Midwest or Canada. Aphids arriving by air can already be at really high populations. However and wherever your SBA come from, know that populations can build rapidly. In fact, populations can double in 9 to 13 days. Plus, aphids can produce upward of 15 generations per season. These offspring will mature in just 3 to 7 days. Now let's learn about white dwarf SBA morphs. Sounds like it's out of a video game, but the white dwarf is a real soybean aphid. No one's sure why normal green SBAs give birth to these dwarfs, to these smaller, lighter colored SBAs. Perhaps it's high temperatures, lower plant nutritional quality, or shorter day length that spur their development. White dwarfs are more likely to develop during certain soybean reproductive stages, the R3 and R4 stages, when host quality declines. We'll learn about that soon. These white dwarfs aren't baby SBAs, nor are they a different species. White dwarfs live half as long and make 70% fewer nymphs compared to the normal green form. They also reproduce more slowly and are less likely to exceed the economic threshold of 250 aphids per plant. Okay, let's get on to monitoring your fields. Scouting and correct identification are critical. Mostly you'll find wingless SBAs, but keep a lookout for winged aphids and white dwarfs too. And don't get misled when you find shed skins, since these can be mistaken for white dwarfs. You don't want to count cast skins when determining economic threshold. Usually, you'll first find SBAs on leaflet undersides. Aphids like to feed on the newest foliage first, but don't ignore older leaves. At high densities, you'll find SBAs everywhere. Here, SBA has even infested plant stems. And while you're out there scouting, be sure to look for the good guys, the natural enemies. We'll get to them later. Here you see ants protecting SBAs from predators and parasitoids. In fact, what they're doing is protecting their food supply. Aphids suck up so much sugary sap from the soybeans that they're always excreting honeydew, a shiny, sugary substance that looks like dewdrops and tastes sort of like honey. With large infestations of SBA, you're likely to find sooty mold. This dark-colored fungus grows on leaves covered with honeydew. Also keep in mind that SBAs can transmit diseases such as alfalfa mosaic, cucumber mosaic, soybean mosaic, yellow bean mosaic, peanut mottle, and peanut stripe. Remember that toxic saliva we mentioned nearly 10 slides back? When aphid populations explode, you get stunted, yellowed plants, making for reduced plant vigor, growth rates, pod and seed counts, and yield. In severe cases, SBA reduces yields up to 50%, but more often losses run in the 10 to 15% range. Aphid damage can be exacerbated by other factors, including drought. Drought-stressed plants are favorable hosts for aphids, meaning the aphids reproduce even more quickly. Of course, you want to catch problems before they get out of hand, and the way to do that is to get out your 20-power or 30-power hand lens and get in the field and look. Take a scouting card and a pen to record populations. Also, carry a visual guide with you to estimate the number of aphids on a leaflet. Here's how to get a visual guide. Got a pen and piece of paper handy? Framed here in dark blue are 2 ways to download the University of Wisconsin's excellent visual guide for estimating SBA populations. I'll pause in a moment so you can write these web addresses down. And not to worry if you're still scrambling for pen and paper. We'll get back to this guide in another 5 minutes or so, and you'll have another chance to write these addresses down. So here you go. First, a short bitmark that actually takes you right to the second web address. That web page PDF at the University of Wisconsin. And here comes the pause. Okay, so you want to start scouting aphids early on when soybeans reach V1 or V2 growth stages, about mid-June. But what's a growth stage? Here's how growth stages work, and reproductive stages too. The very first stage is VE, V for vegetative and E for emergence, for when the stem, the hypocotyl, breaks through the soil surface. Depending on soil temperatures, it can take about 5 to 21 days post-planting before plants emerge. VC comes next, C for cotyledon. Cotyledons are leaves that are actually part of the embryo inside the seed. They green up as they emerge and can supply the plant's nutrient needs for 7 to 10 days. Also at VC stage, you'll see a pair of the first large basal leaves, called unifoliate leaves, because they don't have those 3 leaflets that all subsequent growth does. The plant's first node starts here. Next is V1 stage. That's where the first 3-part leaves trifoliate leaves unroll, and that's about when you begin scouting. At V2 stage, you've got 2 nodes and 2 sets of unfolded trifoliate leaves and rhizobia nodules on the roots. From V3 through V6, trifoliate leaves keep unfurling. But now we switch over to the R stage, the reproductive stage, though of course soybeans keep pushing out leaves all through that R stage. R1 begins right with the very first flower. R2 is full bloom, open flowers at the top 2 nodes. R3 is beginning pod stage. You've got tiny pods up to 1/4 inch long on one of the 4 upper nodes of the plant. Note that 60 to 75% of flowers abort, never producing a pod. R4 is full pod. You'll see 3/4 inch pods on one of the 4 upper nodes. Now the plant enters the critical yield period when it's sensitive to lack of moisture. At R5, beginning seed, seeds are 1/8 inch long on one of the 4 upper nodes. Now plants have an even larger water and nutrient demand. Next is R6, full seed. Here's where a green seed fills the pod cavity on one of the 4 upper nodes of the plant. R7 is beginning maturity. That's where one pod anywhere on the plant has mature coloring, light brown, as if it's starting to dry out. Last comes R8, full maturity. Now 95% of the pods show mature color. You can harvest 7 to 10 days after this point, depending, of course, on the weather. Typically, aphids come in 2 waves. The local movement off buckthorn during June tends to be light, but those long-range migrants that appear suddenly after thunderstorms around the beginning of July, these often come at much higher numbers. What is the economic injury level for soybean aphids? It's the point at which aphid populations cause economic loss to your crop. Research has shown that the economic injury level is 675 aphids per plant. Those 675 aphids being the total count from the R1 to the R6 stages. The percentage loss in yield? That can range from 10 to 50%, but you want to take action before that happens. The economic threshold, also known as the action threshold, is an average of 250 SBAs per plant with the population still increasing. It's a heads up giving you plenty of lead time to control SBAs before they hit that economic injury level of 675 aphids per plant, a population that would wallop your crop and your bottom line. But keep in mind, there's no point acting before aphids reach threshold between the R1 and R6 stages. You'll spend money on controls you don't need. Research has shown that before the R1 and after the R6 stage, aphid populations don't affect yields. Factors such as natural enemies can help keep aphids below threshold. We'll get to them soon. So, how do you scout for soybean aphids? Start at least 5 rows into the field. That's because the edge could have more aphids than might be representative across the field. If you sample from the edges, it could bias your sampling. Wander at random throughout the field as you sample. From week to week, use a different path. Begin scouting your soybean fields at R1 stage in mid-June and do so weekly from mid-June right through August when plants are at R6. Remember that R stages are all reproductive stages, beginning with the first flower and for our purposes, concluding as a green seed fills the pod on one of the 4 upper nodes. Here's the scouting card the New York State IPM program uses for soybean aphids. Once you estimate the number of aphids on a plant, you'll record it on a plant-to-plant basis. Each plant you evaluate counts as one sample. Also make note of other pests as well as natural enemies on plants. While you're at it, gather as much information about crop, field, and weather conditions as you can. Once you've trained your eye to know what certain populations look like on leaves and stems, estimating aphids isn't too hard. Examine 20 plants in 5 different places in the field to get a good representative sample. The leaflet in this photo has 50 live SBAs. Recall that the threshold is 250 soybean aphids for the entire plant. Record how many aphids you estimate on the scouting card. If a field averages 250 aphids per plant, come back in 3 days and check it again. If the population is increasing, consider a control measure. And of course, make note of natural enemies, field conditions, and the weather while you're at it. Again, framed in blue, that University of Wisconsin resource and the short bitmark that leads you to it. Go there to download Should I Spray for Soybean Aphid, a great resource for estimating numbers. We'll pause so you can jot it down. Here, by the way, you have 170 aphids on one leaflet. This leaflet is crawling with aphids, about 350. This plant has exceeded threshold just from one leaflet. Let's take a look at these graphs showing information from 4 years of monitoring soybean pests. In this project, several extension educators around the state each monitored plots in soybean fields for pests like soybean rust, soybean aphid, and a few others. Working clockwise on each graph, the column on the right of the graph shows the locations of the plots. The bottom axis is the population of aphids by date in each plot. The left axis shows the average number of aphids per plant, and the red line through the middle shows if and when a given plot reached economic threshold of 250 aphids per plant. A closer look tells us that in 2006, SBA populations stayed low statewide, with only a few fields exceeding threshold late in the season. In 2007, the data suggests that SBA populations were very high, Most of the aphids came to New York on weather fronts from places that also had high populations. But in 2008, SBA populations again stayed low statewide. And by contrast, in 2009, populations again were very high. And again, it's likely that SBAs blew in via weather fronts from states to our west and from Canada. Now take a look at this table, because New York wasn't the only state that tended to have low aphid populations one year and high ones the next. Some research suggests that predation by natural enemies could be a contributing factor in these oscillating populations. Why? In years of high aphid populations, a concurrent tendency toward high populations of natural enemies, predators, parasites, and insect diseases late in the season could have reduced the number of winged aphids returning to buckthorn to overwinter. Low SBA years probably saw fewer predators and thus greater winter survival. Since 2009, soybean aphid populations have remained relatively low. We don't know why that oscillating pattern has changed. It could be that the combination of predation, soybean seed treated with insecticide, and resistant cultivars have kept populations low. Using insecticide-treated seed gives plants 45 days of early protection from aphids. This could help reduce an early season buildup from those overwintering SBA. Resistant cultivars slow aphid development too, also help keeping them down. The takeaway? Where you can, choose non-pesticidal controls that protect the environment and help save on your pesticide bill. Plan ahead. For instance, you could plant resistant soybean cultivars. These are classically bred non-GMO cultivars. They incorporate 4 genes that help the plant slow the aphid's development, meaning that populations won't escalate as quickly. Planting them avoids, for the most part, the need for control. Most years, SBA-resistant plants stay below threshold, but resistance doesn't equal immunity. In years with very high populations, even resistant plants could surpass economic threshold. In fact, researchers in the Midwest have found small populations of 3 different SBA biotypes that show a better ability to survive and multiply on resistant cultivars. Researchers aren't sure if we have any of these variants in New York. A second option is using insecticide pre-treated seed, which protects seedlings and young plants from SBA as well as seed corn maggot. Aphid protection lasts for up to 45 days after planting, but keep in mind the long-range SBA migrants will most likely arrive after that 45-day protection window closes. Don't let down your guard. Keep scouting. And do take into account SBA's natural enemies. If plants are right around threshold and you see plenty of natural enemies, consider monitoring for a few more days to see whether SBA populations maintain or start to fall. Natural enemies, predators, parasites, or pathogens are biological controls. Biological control happens all the time in nature, but these pest enemies normally lag a little behind the pests. Augmented biocontrol is when you release natural enemies to boost those already there. With SBAs, though, we depend on natural biocontrols. Right now, no research suggests augmented biocontrol will do much for you. Several species of predators attack SBA. Lady beetles are the most well-known, and they're easy to spot. Several species occur in soybeans. Depending on the species, adults can range from 1/32 to 3/8 inch long. Many are reddish-orange with black dots. Some are black with orange, red, or yellow spots, and some are even all black. All have oval-shaped bodies. A single adult of some species can consume between 100 and 270 aphids per day. Lady beetle eggs are normally yellow to orange-red and spindle-shaped. They're laid one against the next in clusters, often conveniently close to an aphid population. The nymphs look much different than adults. Think of them as tiny, bow-legged, brightly colored alligators, somewhat flat and covered with spines. Like the adults, larvae feed on many soft-bodied insects such as aphids. Each larvae, depending on the species, consumes up to 1,200 aphids before pupating into an adult. To pupate, lady beetle larvae attach themselves to stems or leaves. Pupae colors range from yellowish-orange to bright orange. Green lacewings are predators of aphids and other small, soft-bodied insects. Adults are pale green with netted wings and are 1/2 to 3/4 inch long. You might see them around your porch lights on summer nights. Only the larvae are predators. Lacewing larvae grow to 3/8 inch long. The ones you are likely to see are creamy with brown markings. They're spindle-shaped, fat in the middle, skinny at the ends. They catch aphids, spider mites, small caterpillars, thrips, and leafhoppers with their pincers. They can eat as many as 600 aphids in their larval stage. Syrphid fly adults of several species mimic bees, meaning they look and behave similarly to bees. And like bees, they feed on pollen and nectar. Some people call them hoverflies or flower flies. Adults aren't predators, but the larvae are. The larvae are slug-like maggots, lacking legs, with colors varying from whitish cream to green or brown and ranging from 1/4 to 3/4 inch long. They pierce aphids with their hollow, hooked mouth parts and suck them dry. And then there's ground beetles and their kin, tiger beetles. Have you ever turned over a rock and seen a flat black beetle scurrying off to find a hiding place? That would most likely be a nocturnal ground beetle. Most tiger beetles, on the other hand, hunt during the day, but if you come near them, they scoot. In fact, they could be the fastest runners in the wide world of insects, with some exceeding 5 miles per hour. Adult ground beetles can range from 1/16 to 1½ inches long, though tiger beetles rarely exceed 1/2 inch. Like all beetles, they have hard shell-like wing covers. Their wing covers have parallel lines running lengthwise. Most adults are black, but tiger beetles especially can have green, purple, reddish, metallic blue, or other bright markings. Ground and tiger beetles are predators of many insects, both bad guys and good. Some species even climb plants for their prey. Not only that, but recent research suggests that some species feed on a goodly number of weed seeds as well, also a form of biocontrol. Many eat their body weight in prey and weed seeds each day. The larvae of ground and tiger beetles are predators too. Ground beetle larvae live beneath the soil surface, while tiger beetle larvae actually dig burrows when they hatch, enlarging and deepening them as they grow. and waiting at the top of the burrow to ambush their prey. Some new research shows that these larvae can put quite a dent in populations of soil-dwelling pests such as corn rootworm larvae, wireworm, and white grubs. Several predatory true bugs feed on aphids, spider mites, leafhoppers, small caterpillars, and insect eggs. What's a true bug? Both adults and nymphs have piercing or sucking mouthparts, sort of like reverse action syringes that suck out their prey's internal fluids. And eggs hatch into nymphs that very much resemble adults, except that they don't have wings. The big-eyed, minute pirate, assassin, and damsel bugs you see here are all true bugs. Species range in size from very tiny to 1.5 inches long. Also on our good guy list are the many species of parasitoids, mostly parasitic wasps, which range from nearly invisible to as long as 1.5 inches and are brown or black. None will sting people or livestock. They're more like a smart bomb. Adults place eggs in or on aphids and other insect hosts. Larvae feed on, pupate in, and ultimately kill their hosts. You're not likely to see parasitoids, but you might well see the signs they leave. An aphid mummy, for instance, is the bronze-colored shell-like skin left over after a parasitoid exits its host. Note the circular hole where the adult, probably a wasp, emerged from a dead soybean aphid to begin the cycle again. And then there's pathogens. Pathogens, mostly entomopathogenic fungal or viral diseases, can control SBA too. Insect diseases are at their best when the pests these pathogens infect reach large populations. Warm, humid weather often favors pathogens. The big problem is that they're unpredictable, not something you can count on, but great when they occur. Conserving natural enemies is becoming a very important part of agricultural food systems. Certain practices help conserve them. First, know the difference between beneficial organisms and insect pests. Know the good guys when you see them. Second, use thresholds so you apply insecticides only when a pest will cause economic losses, which saves you money too. Third, preserve good habitat for beneficials. Field edges, hedgerows, flowering plants, and water all are important. For instance, many flowering plants provide needed pollen and nectar for beneficials during key parts of their life cycles. There's a fourth element here too. Remember that predators and parasitoids can lag behind the pest population. Natural control lends a big hand, not to be overlooked, but won't always keep pest populations low, which is why we suggest you look for and track signs and symptoms of natural enemies while you're out there scouting. Use all the IPM tools, correct ID, monitoring, economic thresholds, cultural controls, mechanical controls, beneficial organisms, and chemical controls if needed. Where possible, use selective insecticides that kill just pests, protecting beneficials. Yet sometimes, despite your best efforts, SBA populations will exceed economic thresholds. Either you take a hit in yield or use an insecticide. Spray only if your field is over threshold and natural enemies aren't keeping aphids in check. Both conventional and organic insecticides are labeled for SBA in soybeans. But keep in mind that organic insecticides might kill natural enemies, just as conventional insecticides might. To choose among insecticides for soybean aphids on soybeans, please consult the Cornell Guide for Integrated Field Crop Management. This guide has a table of insecticides registered for use in New York for SBA. Always make sure you read and follow the label on the insecticide. Still got your pen and paper handy? You can purchase the guide from your local CCE office or go to the website on this slide. We'll wait while you write it down. Using an insecticide? Timing is everything. You'll get the most benefit during early reproductive stages. Remember that after the R6 stage, aphid populations don't affect yields, so by then, spraying is money down the drain. Equipment considerations are very important. You need optimal coverage of the plants, 98%, to control SBA. Increase your application pressure and the carrier, that is water, per acre, and keep droplet size small. And you've got to use the correct nozzles. Can you tank mix with herbicides? No. Here's why. The timing rarely coincides. The spray nozzles and application pressure don't coincide either. You will get incomplete coverage. Besides, insecticides mistimed for aphids kill many natural enemies. Be careful. Some pyrethroids, when mistimed for aphids, make spider mites flare up. Then there's pest resurgence. Pests could rebound after that first treatment, meaning the need to treat again. Way too often, resurgence happens when the field was sprayed with herbicide nozzles and didn't get complete coverage, or the sprayer wasn't calibrated right. Did you spray? Evaluate how well the insecticide worked. Following each step should control SBA. If aphids rebound, take another look at your procedures. Now and then, SBAs simply need a second application. Let's wrap up simply and succinctly. If you follow the steps of IPM, you can better manage SBA. Especially, remember this, soybean aphids aren't a problem year in and out, which means it's really important to scout every week throughout the growing season, up to the R6 stage. And of course, take action only when you need to. Happy scouting!